If you can really control and choose the right edges in your painting, you're going to be well on your way to becoming an advanced painter. All right, welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is Chris Fornatero, and I help thousands of students every single month get better at painting through my online courses and tutorials that simplify the oil painting process. And today we're going to be talking about edges. Now, I've heard a lot of great painters say that one of the telltale signs of an advanced painter are their edges. So we have a portrait from John Singer Sargent here, and I just want to point out how he utilized edges. Now, I like to think of there being three main kind of edges. There's a hard edge, there's a soft edge, and there's a broken edge. And when I say a hard edge, I mean this right here. Look at that bold stroke and look how hard the edge of that line is. And it just really solidifies like that turn of the brow bone into there and just that harsh plane change right there. It reads very strongly, opposed to say a soft edge, which you could say is, right here in the mustache, about how he let his brush go into the wet paint that was already there. I don't know, maybe that was dry. I mean, it could be, looks a little bit of a dry stroke there, but either way, it kind of feathers and it fades away and just blends right there into the background. You can see that a lot of times with hair. Like, look at the hairline. A lot of times I see in student portraits, the hairline is like very straight and it looks like their hair was painted on. But here, you can see a lot of soft edges happening from the skin to the hair, which helps create that illusion of hair. So, another hard edge right there. And just using a variety of edges helps you portray the subject better. And a lot of times I see in students' work, all the edges are hard. And a lot of times that's because they're working from photos in which all the edges, are hard. Like, you can see the edge of everything. So if you're wondering, like, how do I see different edges? Key is to squint in your eyes and you'll lose certain edges. And a lot of times if you paint it that way, you're going to be better off. But let's take a look at another example. Here's a great painting from Cecilia Beau, and I just want to zoom in on this cat here. All right, so in this cat, look at how much all the edges kind of mesh into one another. Like, that's his pant leg, that's the fur, and they just kind of mesh together. I feel like there's a lot of wet into wet paint happening, with this paw here and the shadow, even the shapes that make up the face, just a lot of soft edges, which really sells the fluffiness in the fur, of the cat, opposed to, say, some edges like in here in the hand to portray that knuckle real strong, or even better in the coat right here, really strong crisp edge that helps define that feel and the texture of it and the structure and sturdiness of this fabric, opposed to the light fluffiness of the cat. All right, now let's take a look at a painter who's actually still alive. This is Patrick Krasinski. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, highly suggest it. He also has a great, extremely valuable Patreon page. If you're looking for plein air tutorials, I don't think anybody does it better than him. He's really good and does these awesome ocean paintings, these wave paintings. But as far as edges go, something I like to point out that I see a lot of times students kind of miss the mark on is horizon line, because you see the horizon line, a lot of times students will just make that horizon line like very crisp and sharp. But look how he's made this horizon line a little softer. He's let it blend a little bit into the sky there because it's very far away. In doing that, it's going to help it sit back there, opposed to, say, like the crest of this wave right here. It's a pretty crisp edge, and it just really gives the sense of the peak of that wave right there. I mean, you can just find great work with edges all throughout this. The white foam, like he's got these distinct shapes of white foam in the wave, but you can see the outsides of it. They blend in to the color of the wave just a little bit, just to give it that foamy feel to it. So always be thinking about your edges. All right, now I'm going to talk about this painting that I did here for a Patreon tutorial, which, by the way, if you're not a patron, highly suggest signing up. If you're looking to add some structure to your learning, add purpose to your learning, and be a part of a great positive painting community, I highly suggest checking out my Patreon page. You'll find this tutorial and literally hundreds of others. There's also painting paths, again, to add some structure to your learning. If you want to know like what to paint first, what to paint second, what to paint third, to progressively get better at a certain subject. There's also tons of painting exercises to really fine tune your skills. And there's the private Facebook group where you can interact with things close to 1,000 other students learning to paint just like you. So if you want to check that out, there's a link to it in the description of this video. So first I'm just going to point out the different edges in this painting, and then I'm going to explain exactly how I got these different edges with the paint. So make sure to stick around. So let's just take a look at like this pumpkin in the back here. It kind of fades into the dark, and so you can see I have that happen in the pumpkin here. There's not like a very hard, crisp edge to define the pumpkin. Like I wanted to lose it into the dark there on the sides. Same with like this pumpkin here. There's definitely like a form, like almost like a hot dog type form or a cylinder type form to these ridges in the pumpkin. In order to do that, I have to go from a dark to slightly lighter to kind of the lightest part there. But you can see there's certain times where there's like a hard edge, like right here. And some of the times it's a soft edge. It's a soft transition, like right here. Or, you know, there's a soft edge with this highlight here. It's not like a hard, crisp edge. Same with like this apple down here. You see a lot of soft edges like right here where that purple is being reflected from the ground right there. Same on this side. And just the transition from light to dark here, you can see here, got a soft edge, opposed to, say, this metal little teapot type thing. Still soft edges like in here, but once I get these bright highlights, I'm not afraid to have a sharp edge, and that's what's going to really help kind of sell the reflective nature of that metal. Again, soft edges like in the wrinkles here, soft transition from light to dark. A lot of times with like reflected light, like you see a little bit of orange reflected in there, I will, you know, brush that orange paint into the wet purple paint that's down there. Same right here, you see I worked in some orange paint into the green and just had that soft edge right there. But like if you look at the stem here, there's a harsh edge right there from light to shadow, and that helps give that stem that like sturdy, strong wood, you know, structure to it. So I just want to kind of point those things out, but now let's talk specifically about this apple. So here are the stages of painting the apple. And what I did first was I just blocked out light and dark. And when you have an apple like this, that's different colors, there's kind of the more the yellow area and more the red area. I still block it out light and shadow. I just make sure that I map out the color like pretty broadly. Like I know like you see like bits of red there and there. You can always go back and like kind of put that in, but just squinting my eyes, this is kind of just the yellow area and this is, you know, the red area. So when I map that out, I make sure to do that, and you see yellow, red, light, shadow. So that's just what I'm trying to get first. And then here I start working in other colors that I see. Like I said, there was that reflected light, that kind of purplish color being reflected in the bottom. And so I put that in, but I work in wet to wet paint and make it a soft, you know, transition, soft edge. And like my brush pressure, I'm not like putting a lot of pressure on the brush. That's something to also pay attention to, is how much pressure you're putting on your brush. Because when I put this in, like I want that paint to work into the red paint that's underneath, so it kind of blends together and gets that effect. Same thing up here, like I started putting in the reds there, also started putting in a slightly lighter value to start giving it more form. And then by the time I get here, you know, I've added even stronger strokes. That's another thing, is as you're building your painting, I always say work thin to thick. Another way of putting it is a lot of times at the beginning of the painting, say like this first stage here, I'm moving the paint. You see the paint's kind of thinner. It's not transparent, but I'm moving the paint, kind of pushing it along. Whereas by the end here, I like to think that I'm applying the paint, like I laid down this stroke right here, almost as if I was laying down a sticker and I want to leave it there. So that's what you see by the end here, just laying down certain color notes, again, trying to keep it in the correct value that I'm doing, but always paying attention to edges. Not a lot of harsh edges here. This is kind of the only main one right there, but you see a lot of these are blending together and they're soft because it's just color changes, not necessarily value changes all the time. Also not afraid to kind of lose edges down here in the shadows, because look at the photo. It's hard to tell. I mean, again, it's a photo, so I know you can see that, but if you're looking at this and you squint your eyes, you'd lose that. So don't be afraid to paint it that way. But let's look at the green pumpkin now and the stages of that. All right, so I got the green pumpkin. I still just mapped it out with light and dark. We got all light here. I did notice like a color shift in here, got a little cooler towards the stem there, so I made that color change, but it's very soft. It's not like there's no real harsh line right here. And in this one, this is where I start to build more values, and you can see I'm starting to kind of carve out those ridges in the pumpkin, but I don't need it to be super dominant right now. I'm working wet into wet paint and letting these color and value shifts kind of blend together. And then by the time I get here, there are certain areas like right here and right here where I do want that harsh edge. But again, working wet into wet paint, utilizing soft edges, same with like the brightest, coolest highlights here, kind of put, like when I lay those strokes down, I'm wanting them to blend into the paint that's already there to a certain degree. Again, like same with the orange reflected light there. So a lot of times when I'm building a painting, or like right here where I'm just working on this one subject in the painting, I start loose. I start with a lot of colors and values kind of mixing together. And then as I go, I start carving it out more, and I start getting more specific and probably more harsh with my edges and kind of dialing in things more crisp where I want. So kind of think about this like starting out very loose and sporadic, and as you go, you dial in, dial in, dial in, dial in, dial in. And the cool thing about that is if you want to paint loose, you can choose where you want to stop. Some people like to dial it in a lot of places, and some like to, leave it alone like once they hit a certain point. So that's going to be up to you. But let's take a look at how I did the metal piece in this. All right, so here I really leaned into working dark to light and just pretty much mapped out the whole thing with a dark, and then progressively found lighter and lighter values. Like this is still a pretty dark value, but it's, it's lighter than this. So I worked that in, again, wanting it to be soft and wanting it to blend into that dark paint a certain amount. I always think about, you start big and you work small, and you're kind of stacking shapes in a way. And then by here, I put in, this is like reflected orange from the pumpkin, put that in, not super strong, letting it blend in, softer edges around there. And when I got to the light parts here, not afraid of, some crisp edges. And here again, soft transition. And a lot of painting metal is just getting the values right and making sure you establish the darks dark enough. So when you put these brightest highlights, they're really going to pop. A lot of times I see students will, not map out this dark enough. And so when they put in the lights, they don't seem that light. Another thing to kind of point out is right here, this soft edge of this green reflecting from the pumpkin, and also just this lost edge from where the metal starts and where the pumpkin starts. And you kind of lose that, establish that right there. You can see in this one, I wasn't afraid to just kind of bring this into the pumpkin and just kind of see it all as one big shape, knowing if I wanted to later, I could add in shapes, add in colors and values to separate them if I wanted to. All right, so I hope this video helped you figure out edges. I know edges was a thing that I struggled with a lot when I was first learning, and I just couldn't like wrap my head around it. I didn't know exactly what people were talking about when they're talking about edges. But again, probably the thing that's going to help you out the most is squint your eyes. If you're looking at something like, Chris, like, what are you talking about losing edges? Like, I see the edge of this and I see the edge of that. It's like, squint your eyes and really think of shapes, not objects. And I think that will help you out a lot. If you have any questions, as always, please leave them in the comments section. I love seeing them. They help me make videos. And if you want to see the full version of this tutorial, it is on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description below. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.